Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are literally getting down to the bone.
Mm,
You shared some fantastic sources with us, all about the skeletal system. And our mission is pretty simple. We're going to, crack open these sources together
no,
and pull out the most essential nuggets about bones and joints, helping you get a really solid grip on what's holding you together.
absolutely. And it's easy to take your skeleton for granted, isn't it? It's
Ah,
just, well, it's there.
totally.
But looking at these sources, you see it's actually an incredibly dynamic and complex system.
Right.
It's doing so much more than just, like, letting you stand up.
Totally. And the numbers alone are kind of wild. The sources
Mhm.
point out an adult body has 206 bones.
Yeah, 206.
Individual pieces.
Yeah.
And then they mention around 360 joints connecting them all. I mean, that's a masterpiece of biological engineering right inside you.
It really is. And it all starts, I think, with understanding its fundamental roles.
Okay, so let's kick off with that then. Your sources list several core functions for the skeletal system. If you had to boil it down, what are the absolute non-negotiables?
Well, the most foundational role, and the one we all kind of intuitively get, is support.
Right.
Bones provide that internal framework, the scaffolding that holds the entire body upright and gives it shape.
Like the studs in the walls of a house, giving it structure.
Precisely. Yeah, good analogy.
Yeah,
And building on that structure, they also offer crucial protection
protection.
for your delicate internal organs. Think about your skull, shielding your brain,
Okay, yeah.
or the rib cage acting like a shield for your heart and lungs.
Right, essential body armor woven right into the structure.
So
Okay, what about movement? That feels like a big one.
it is, yeah. And the sources make a really key point here. Movement isn't just the bones themselves.
Hmm.
It's the joints working in concert with muscles, ligaments, and tendons that actually make mobility possible. The bones provide the levers, you could say,
Mm-hmm.
but the whole system has to work together.
Okay, so the bone's the hard part. The joint is the pivot point.
Mm.
But you need the muscles pulling and the ligaments and tendons connecting to actually make something happen, like swinging your arm or walking. It's a team sport.
Yeah, exactly. The whole system is designed for that integrated function. Now, another function people might not immediately think of is storage.
Storage.
Yeah, your bones are a major reservoir for
Wow.
calcium.
Okay, the calcium bank idea. Why is storing calcium in the bones so important, like beyond just making the bones strong?
Wow, that's a great question. And it touches on how integrated the body is, really.
Yeah.
Calcium isn't just for bones. It's absolutely vital for nerve function,
Oh, wow.
muscle contraction, including your heart, actually, and blood clotting.
Huh.
So if calcium levels in your blood happen to drop too low, the body will actually pull calcium out of your bones to maintain those critical functions.
No kidding. Even if it weakens the bone over time.
Yeah, even then. So the bone storage is this dynamic system supporting the entire body, not just itself.
Wow. Okay, that makes the calcium bank idea way more significant. It's not just like saving for a rainy day, it's a lifeline for the whole system.
Pretty much.
What's the final big function the sources mention?
That would be blood cell creation. The sources highlight that red bone marrow, which is found inside certain bones,
Right.
is where red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are all produced. Hematopoiesis, it's called.
Seriously. So the same stuff providing your structural support is also like churning out the components of your blood? That's kind of mind-blowing.
It is.
It connects the skeletal system directly to your circulatory and immune systems.
It really ties it all together, showing the skeletal system is far more than just a rigid frame.
Okay, I feel like I've got a much better handle on what it does now. So let's peel back the layers a bit and look at what the skeletal system is actually made of. Your sources list several key ingredients.
Right, yeah, the sources give us the main players. Bones themselves, obviously. Bone marrow, which we just touched on.
Mhm.
Cartilage, joints, ligaments, synovial membrane, synovial fluid, and bursa. We'll see how these bits all come together.
Okay, and the sources give us a deep dive into the anatomy of a typical long bone, right? Like the ones in your arm or leg. How should we visualize one of these?
Okay, so imagine a long, sort of cylindrical structure. The sources break it into three main parts.
Yeah.
The proximal epiphysis,
Proximal. Okay.
which is the end closer to the center of your body or where the bone attaches.
So that's the top end of your thigh bone up by your hip.
Exactly that. Then you have the long central shaft, that's the diaphysis.
The main body of the bone. Okay, makes sense.
Yep. And finally, the distal epiphysis, which is the end farthest from the point of attachment.
Gotcha.
So the bottom end of that thigh bone down by your knee.
Got it. Two ends, one long middle bit. What about the different layers and tissues within this structure? The sources get pretty detailed here.
Yeah, they do. Starting from the very outside, there's the periosteum.
Periosteum.
The sources describe it as a tough, fibrous membrane covering the outer surface, almost like a protective sheath for the bone.
So the bone's outer wrapper, kind of?
Think of it more like a tough, living membrane. It actually contains blood vessels and nerves that supply the bone.
Oh, okay.
Just beneath that is the compact bone. This is the really dense, hard layer that gives bones their strength and rigidity. It's especially prominent in the diaphysis, the shaft.
Right, that's the super hard stuff that makes impacts hurt so much.
That's the primary structural strength, yeah. Moving inward, lining the central cavity of the shaft, is the endosteum.
Endosteum, inside.
Right, and that central space itself is the medullary cavity.
In a previous video, I discussed the fact that all of our bones can be classified into just 5 different categories based on their shape: long bones, short bones, flat bones, irregular bones, and sesamoid bones. In this video, I'll discuss the anatomy of a typical long bone, like for example the humerus. Let's first look at the external anatomy of a long bone. The elongated central part of a long bone is called the diaphysis. At each end of the diaphysis is an enlarged area of bone known as the epiphysis. The diaphysis is connected to the epiphysis by a thin segment of bone known as the metaphysis. The surfaces of the epiphyses, where bones form a joint, are covered with a thin layer of articular cartilage. Articular cartilage reduces friction and absorbs shock when bones move in a joint. The rest of the external surface of a long bone is covered with periosteum, a tough connective tissue sheath. The periosteum is divided into 2 layers: an outer fibrous layer of dense irregular connective tissue that protects bone, and an inner osteogenic layer that contains bone-forming cells. If we cut the humerus in half lengthwise, we can examine the internal anatomy of a long bone. The wall of the diaphysis is made of dense or compact bone. Compact bone is incredibly strong and protects and supports bone. Lining the inside of the compact bone is a thin membrane called the endosteum. It contains bone-forming cells, as well as some connective tissue. The hollow cylindrical space in the middle of the diaphysis is called the medullary cavity. In an adult, this cavity is filled with yellow bone marrow, which is mostly made of fat cells. The epiphyses are made of spongy bone, which is lightweight and made of a latticework of irregular sheets of bone called trabeculae. Filling the spaces between these trabeculae is red bone marrow. Red bone marrow is mostly composed of developing red and white blood cells and platelets. Thanks for watching.
And the sources say the medullary cavity in adults contains yellow marrow.
Correct. Yellow marrow is primarily composed of fat tissue, fat storage.
Okay, fat storage right in the middle of your bone. Interesting. And where was that red marrow we talked about, the stuff that makes blood cells?
Okay, so the sources place red marrow mainly within the spongy bone.
Spongy bone.
Yeah, this is a lighter, less dense type of bone tissue found primarily in the epiphyses, the ends of the bone, and also lining the medullary cavity in places. It looks a bit like a honeycomb or a sponge, hence the name.
So dense, compact bone for strength on the outside, lighter, spongy bone inside the ends where you maybe need more flexibility or spaces for marrow. That's cool design.
It is efficient.
And at the very ends where bones meet other bones, at the joints.
That's where you find articular cartilage. The sources specify this is a smooth, flexible tissue covering the joint surfaces of bones.
Okay.
It acts like a cushion and provides a really low friction surface.
Essential for joints to move without, like, grinding against each other.
Absolutely critical, yeah, for smooth, pain-free movement. Oh, and the sources also threw in a couple of important anatomical landmarks to recognize on bones.
Landmarks.
Yeah, foramen and process.
Anatomical landmarks, like geological features on a map, but for bones.
Kind of, yeah, exactly. A foramen is essentially an opening or hole through the bone.
Okay.
The sources say blood vessels and nerves pass through these.
Like little tunnels through the bone structure.
Exactly. And a process is a projection or a bump on the surface of the bone.
A bump.
Yeah. These bumps are often where muscles or tendons attach. They give them leverage to move the bone.
Okay, so holes for traffic, like nerves and vessels, and bumps for hooking things onto, like, muscles. It makes sense. The bone surface isn't just smooth. It has features for interaction.
It's all designed to facilitate the overall function of the musculoskeletal system.
Mm-hmm.
And that bone itself isn't static, right? The sources talk about it being formed and remodeled.
Right, yeah, it's not like a static piece of wood. It's living tissue that changes. The sources mention ossification.
Ossification. It's the fancy term for the process of bone formation.
Okay.
The sources note this is how, for instance, a baby's cartilage skeleton turns into bone, and also how bones repair themselves after a fracture.
So, growth and repair. Got it. And the sources introduce our two main cellular players in this process, osteoclasts and osteoblasts.
Yes, these guys are key to what's called bone remodeling. The sources helpfully break down the names. Osteoclasts. The bone clast part means to break.
Oh.
These are the cells that break down old, damaged, or maybe just unnecessary bone tissue.
They're like the demolition crew, clearing the way.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And osteoblasts, the bone blast means like immature formative element. They are the construction crew.
Okay.
They deposit new bone matrix to build new bone tissue.
So it's this constant dynamic balance, old bone being removed, new bone being laid down, all the time.
That's the process of bone remodeling, yeah. It happens continuously throughout life. It allows bone to adapt to stresses, repair damage, and just maintain its overall strength.
Yeah.
The sources also state that bone is a type of connective tissue.
Right.
And is the second hardest tissue in the body.
Second hardest after, what, tooth enamel, I assume?
You got it. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Tough stuff, but also incredibly dynamic beneath the surface.
Okay, so we've got the functions, the structure, how bones build and rebuild themselves. But that incredible range of human motion we talked about earlier, that relies entirely on how these bones connect, which brings us neatly to joints.
Joints, or articulations as they're sometimes called. They're simply the points where two or more bones meet up.
Okay.
And you can classify them based on how they're built, their structure, or by how much movement they allow.
And the sources give us three main classifications based on that structure and movement, right?
They do. First up, fibrous joints. These are held together really tightly by fibrous connective tissue and critically are described as not movable, immovable.
Like the sutures between the bones of your skull. They're fused together for protection.
Exactly that. Super stable, zero movement. Next category, cartilaginous joints.
Cartilaginous.
Here, the bones are joined by cartilage. The sources say these are slightly movable. They provide stability but allow just a little bit of give.
Like the joints between your vertebrae, in your spine, you can bend a bit, but they're mostly about support and protection.
That's a good example, yeah. They offer stability with some limited flexibility. And then we have the big category, the one with the most variety, synovial joints.
Ah, okay.
These are the most common type, making up most of those 360 joints we mentioned earlier. They're described as freely movable.
Ah, these are the joints that let us actually do stuff, run, jump, throw, type, all that.
Precisely. They're characterized by having a space between the bones, which is enclosed within a synovial capsule, and they're held together by ligaments. The sources also detail the key components that make these joints work so smoothly.
Okay, lay 'em on me. What are the parts?
All right, so you have the synovial capsule. This is an outer layer of strong fibrous tissue that surrounds the joint, providing structural support.
The outer wrapper of the joint itself, like the periosteum for bone?
Kind of, yeah, but specifically for the joint.
Yeah.
Tough and fibrous, holding everything in. Inside that capsule is the synovial membrane. This membrane lines the capsule, and its job is to secrete synovial fluid.
The magic fluid. I remember reading that.
A magic lubricant, exactly. Synovial fluid fills that joint space. The sources note it reduces friction between the articular cartilages on the ends of the bones during movement.
Like oil in an engine.
Just like oil in a well-tuned machine.
Huh.
It also provides nutrients to the cartilage, which doesn't have its own blood supply.
Ah, okay. So the membrane makes the fluid lubricates and feeds the cartilage, and the articular cartilage on the bone ends provides that smooth surface. Teamwork again.
Definitely.
The sources also mention ligaments and bursa here.
Right. Ligaments, as the sources define them, are bands of tough, fibrous tissue connecting bones to other bones across the joint.
Bone to bone.
Bone to bone. They're crucial for joint stability, basically preventing excessive or abnormal movements.
Got it. And bursa. What's a bursa?
A bursa. It's a small fibrous sac.
Mm.
It's lined with synovial membrane and contains just a small amount of synovial fluid. The sources say these sacs act as cushions in areas that are subject to friction, often between bones and tendons, or muscles near a joint.
Like a little buffer pillow to prevent rubbing and irritation.
That's the idea, exactly. They help reduce friction and absorb shock in key high-friction areas.
Okay, cool. And since synovial joints are freely movable, the sources break down the types of movement possible based on the shapes of the bone ends that fit together. 6 types listed.
Yeah, it describes the incredible variety of motion we have. First, pivot joints.
Pivot.
One bone rotates around another like a pivot. The sources give the example of the joint in your neck that lets you turn your head side to side,
Okay,
or your skull pivots on your spine, basically.
makes sense. Gliding joints.
These allow bones to just slide past each other in a linear direction, back and forth or side to side. The small bones in your wrist and ankle joints are good examples.
Ah,
They just slide around a bit to allow complex hand and foot movements.
okay. Condyloid or ellipsoidal joints? Those names sound complex.
Yeah, a bit. The sources describe these as allowing movement in multiple directions.
Right.
So bending, straightening, moving side to side, but not rotation around an axis.
No rotation.
No real rotation. The wrist joint, where your forearm bones meet your wrist bones, is a primary example. You can move your hand up, down, left, right, but you can't really rotate it independently right there at that joint.
Okay, multi-directional, but no spinning. Ball and socket. I think I know this one. Shoulder, hip.
Classic joint, exactly. One bone has a rounded, ball-shaped end that fits into a cup-like socket in another bone.
Right.
And the sources say these allow for the widest range of motion. Forward, backward, side to side, and rotation. Your shoulder and hip joints are the prime examples, letting you swing your arm or leg in a big circle.
The ultimate movers. Okay. Hinge joints. These sound simpler.
They are. These allow movement primarily in just one plane, like the hinge of a dorsiflexion, which is bending, and extension, which is straightening.
Like my elbow.
Your elbow and knee joints are the textbook examples, yeah.
Simple back and forth. Okay. And finally, saddle joints.
Saddle joints.
Yeah.
Named because the surfaces of the two bones fit together sort of like two saddles interlocked.
Huh. Okay.
The sources indicate this unique shape allows for specific movements, including opposition. The joint at the base of your thumb is the most prominent saddle joint.
My thumb.
Yeah, it gives your thumb its unique ability to touch your fingertips, which is, crucial for grasping things.
Ah, the thumb's superpower joint. That variety, just in the synovial joints alone, is incredible when you think about it. From simple hinges to complex saddles and those full-range ball and sockets.
It's really tailoring form to function at its finest,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, we've really dug into your sources here. We've gone from the big picture function, support, protection, movement, storage, blood cell creation, down to the detailed structure of a bone and all the different types of joints that connect them, including all the specific bits like marrow, cartilage, and synovial fluid.
We've pulled out, I think, the essential information about the framework that quite literally shapes you and allows you to interact with the world.
And understanding these core mechanics from the sources you shared is just so powerful, isn't it? It's not abstract science. It's learning about the incredible machine you inhabit every single day. It's the foundation that allows your body to do everything it does.
It connects the textbook concepts directly to your lived experience.
Definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's maybe a final thought to leave you with, building on what we've explored today. Think about the fact that your bones aren't just static props. They are dynamic, living tissues constantly being broken down and rebuilt by those osteoclasts and osteoblasts
That remodeling.
in a silent, ceaseless cycle happening right now inside you. And alongside that, consider the just astonishing coordination and complexity required for those 360 unique joints, each with its own specific shape, its own components, its own range of motion to work together harmoniously.
Yeah.
Allowing you the effortless ability to perform actions as simple as picking up a pen or as complex as, I don't know, throwing a ball. It's a level of internal sophistication we rarely pause to appreciate.
It truly makes you marvel at the human body, doesn't it?
It really does. Well, thank you for bringing these fascinating sources to the deep dive today. Unpacking the fundamentals of the skeletal system was genuinely eye-opening.
My pleasure. It was a great discussion.